The single-action revolver. Every revolver on this list traces its roots back to the handgun that became an icon of the American West. And it all starts with one simple mechanical principle. A true single-action revolver requires the shooter to manually cock the hammer before every shot. Only then will the trigger release the hammer and fire the round. Unlike most modern revolvers, the Colt Single-Action Army of 1873, better known as the Peacemaker, used a side-loading gate and a spring-loaded ejector rod that forced shooters to load fresh cartridges and eject spent cases one chamber at a time. By today's standards, reloading was painfully slow, but at the time it was considered a fair trade for a revolver that was incredibly reliable, durable, and mechanically straightforward. The Peacemaker itself evolved from Colt's earlier open-top revolver. Once a competing patent covering bored-through cylinders expired in 1870, Colt was finally free to produce a true metallic cartridge revolver. By then, Smith & Wesson had already established a strong lead in that rapidly expanding market, making Colt's entry an effort to catch up rather than pioneer the concept. The revolver's legacy stretched far beyond the frontier. General George S. Patton famously carried an engraved ivory-gripped single-action army during World War II, nearly 70 years after the revolver first appeared. Even more impressive, Colt has manufactured variations of this same basic design across 4 separate production eras spanning well over a century and a half. Few firearms have remained relevant for that long, proving that a design centered around one deliberate limitation, cocking the hammer before every shot, never really needed reinventing. The double-action revolver took that classic formula and solved its biggest drawback. Instead of manually cocking the hammer before every shot, one long trigger pull both rotates the cylinder and cocks and releases the hammer in a single smooth motion. At the same time, shooters can still thumb-cock the hammer first whenever they want a lighter, more precise single-action trigger pull for an accurate shot. That versatility helped revolvers like the Smith & Wesson K-frame military and police, later known as the legendary Model 10, become the standard sidearm for American law enforcement through much of the 20th century. Officers could safely carry the revolver with the hammer down, yet still respond instantly under stress without taking the extra step of manually cocking it first. The trade-off was trigger weight. A double-action pull is typically much heavier than a finely tuned single-action trigger, often requiring 2 or even 3 times as much force. It was a deliberate balance between speed and precision, and for generations it shaped how police officers were trained to shoot their duty revolvers. Smith & Wesson later expanded the concept with the Model 19 Combat Magnum. Built on a slightly lighter frame but chambered for the powerful .357 Magnum cartridge, it offered officers significantly more stopping power than the Model 10's .38 Special, without forcing them to carry the larger, heavier N-frame Magnum revolvers that were better suited for hunting than everyday police work. If you've ever wondered why some revolvers have exposed hammers while others don't, those kinds of engineering choices are exactly what we explore here. Every mechanism has a purpose, and every design tells a story. If you enjoy learning how firearms actually work, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown. The snub-nose revolver proved that a defensive handgun didn't have to be large to be effective. Colt demonstrated that idea in 1927 with the Detective Special, a compact 6-shot .38 Special that was small enough to disappear into a coat pocket or ride comfortably inside the waistband without sacrificing practical firepower. Smith & Wesson answered in 1950 with a direct competitor introduced at the International Association of Chiefs of Police convention, the J-Frame Chief Special, a name that still lives on today. Most snub-nose revolvers use barrels under 2 inches long and reduce capacity from the traditional 6 rounds down to 5. In return, they offer a compact profile that's easy to conceal under a jacket or even inside a pocket. Exactly what plainclothes detectives, undercover officers, and armed citizens were looking for. The J-frame formula proved remarkably successful. More than 70 years later, Smith & Wesson still builds updated versions of the same basic design, while companies like Ruger, Taurus, and Charter Arms have produced countless revolvers inspired by it. More importantly, the J-frame didn't just compete with Colt's Detective Special, it eventually overtook it. Its slightly smaller dimensions and exceptionally smooth double-action trigger gave many concealed carriers a compelling reason to switch. ending Colt's long-held dominance of the snub-nose market. That evolution, now the hammerless revolver, was designed to solve one very specific problem. During a high-stress draw, especially from a pocket, an exposed hammer can easily catch on clothing and cost valuable time. Smith & Wesson addressed that issue in 1952 with the Centennial. Instead of leaving the hammer exposed, the company enclosed it entirely within the frame, creating a double-action-only revolver, with nothing protruding to snag on a pocket lining or the edge of a jacket during the draw. The original Centennial models even featured a grip safety inspired by the 1911 pistol. While innovative on paper, many shooters viewed it as an unnecessary addition to a revolver, and it never gained widespread acceptance. Smith & Wesson eventually eliminated the grip safety from later production, simplifying the design and making it more practical. Today, hammerless J-frame revolvers remain a top choice for deep concealment. Without an exposed hammer, they can even be fired from inside a jacket pocket during a life-threatening emergency without the action hanging up on fabric, something a traditional exposed hammer revolver can't reliably do. Smith & Wesson later introduced a middle-ground solution with the Bodyguard model. Instead of completely hiding the hammer, the company covered it with a protective shroud that greatly reduced the chance of snagging while still allowing the shooter to thumb-cock the hammer for a lighter, more precise single-action shot when circumstances permitted. The large-frame Magnum revolver owes much of its existence to one man, Elmer Keith. For years, Keith experimented with increasingly powerful .44 special handloads, pushing the cartridge far beyond its original limits. His work eventually convinced Smith & Wesson and Remington to develop a factory version of the concept, resulting in the introduction of the .44 Magnum. To handle the new cartridge, Smith & Wesson introduced a purpose-built revolver in 1955 using its largest N-frame platform. That revolver would later become famous as the Model 29. Early sales were surprisingly modest. The Model 29 appealed mainly to dedicated handgun hunters and serious shooting enthusiasts, but everything changed in 1971 when Clint Eastwood's character in Dirty Harry famously described it as the most powerful handgun in the world. Overnight, demand exploded, and what had been a slow-selling hunting revolver became one of the most recognizable firearms ever produced. Large-frame Magnum revolvers like the Model 29 are still highly respected by handgun hunters today. Their massive steel frames and reinforced cylinders are built to withstand the tremendous pressures generated by powerful Magnum cartridges, loads that could eventually damage or wear out smaller-framed revolvers after extended use. In the 1990s, Smith & Wesson introduced the Mountain Gun, a lighter variation of the N-frame. It delivered full .44 Magnum performance while reducing overall weight, making it a better companion for hunters and outdoorsmen who spent long days hiking through rugged backcountry. Before swing-out cylinders became the standard, engineers searched for faster ways to reload a revolver. One of the most ingenious solutions was the top-break design. Instead of swinging the cylinder out to the side, a top-break revolver hinges at the frame. As the barrel and cylinder pivot downward, a star-shaped extractor automatically lifts and ejects every spent cartridge case at the same time. Compared to loading and unloading one chamber at a time, it was a dramatic improvement in speed. Smith & Wesson's Model 3, Schofield, became one of the best-known examples during the 1870s. Cavalry soldiers appreciated being able to reload much faster on horseback than they could with a traditional single-action revolver that required loading through a side gate one round at a time. Across the Atlantic, Britain's Webley service revolvers relied on the same basic system and remained in military service through World War I and well into World War II. Despite its speed, the top-break design had one major weakness. Over years of heavy use, the hinge could gradually loosen, reducing the tight lockup between the barrel and frame. Solid frame revolvers with swing-out cylinders avoided this problem entirely, offering greater long-term durability. Britain continued using top-break revolvers longer than most nations, fielding the Enfield No. 2 throughout World War II even after swing-out cylinder designs had already become the dominant standard across most of the world. The automatic revolver is one of the most unusual handgun designs ever produced. In the late 1890s, Colonel George Fosbury wanted to combine the light, crisp trigger and self-cycling operation of the new semi-automatic pistols with the powerful .455 cartridge used in Britain's standard service revolvers. His solution, patented in 1896 and manufactured by Webley beginning in 1901, was unlike anything that came before it. Instead of using a fixed frame, the Webley-Fosbury's entire upper assembly, including the barrel and cylinder, slides rearward under recoil. Distinctive zigzag grooves machined into the cylinder convert that rearward movement into rotational motion, automatically indexing the next chamber while simultaneously recocking the hammer. The result is a revolver that uses recoil to cycle itself, blending the operating characteristics of a semi-automatic pistol with the reliability and cylinder-fed design of competitive shooter Walter Winans, demonstrated just how capable the Webley-Fosbury could be when he fired 12 rounds into a 3-inch target in roughly 15 seconds using a speed loader. An impressive achievement in 1902, decades before practical speed shooting became an organized sport. Despite its innovative design, the revolver had a critical weakness. Its exposed sliding mechanism was highly vulnerable to dirt, mud, and debris, any of which could interfere with the action and cause malfunctions. Reliability suffered under harsh field conditions, and that ultimately limited its appeal. Production ended in 1924 after fewer than 4,150 examples had been built. Rather than becoming the future of handgun design, the automatic revolver remains one of firearms history's most fascinating technological dead ends. Its story includes another unusual chapter from World War I. Before synchronized machine guns became standard equipment on military aircraft, some British pilots carried Webley-Fosbury revolvers into the cockpit. Their unusually fast rate of fire made them a practical backup weapon for engaging enemy aircraft or observation balloons, adding yet another remarkable footnote to an already unconventional design. The convertible revolver takes a completely different approach to versatility. Every revolver we've covered so far is permanently chambered for a single cartridge. Once it leaves the factory, that's the caliber it will use for the rest of its life. Convertible revolvers break that convention by including 2 interchangeable cylinders, allowing one firearm to safely chamber 2 different cartridges. Take the Ruger Blackhawk chambered in .45 Colt as an example. Many models are sold with a second cylinder chambered in .45 ACP. Swapping between them takes only a few moments and requires nothing more than removing the base pin and installing the alternate cylinder. That simple change effectively gives the owner 2 different revolvers in one. The classic .45 Colt delivers traditional performance and plenty of power, while the far more common .45 ACP is typically less expensive to shoot and produces noticeably lighter recoil. For many owners, that means they can spend more time practicing with the same firearm they'll actually rely on in the field. Ruger applies the same concept to its Single 6, one of the company's most popular rimfire revolvers. It ships with one cylinder for .22 long rifle and another for .22 Winchester Magnum rimfire. That combination makes it an excellent choice for new shooters. Affordable .22 LR ammunition keeps practice inexpensive, while switching to .22 Magnum provides a significant increase in performance whenever more power is needed, all without buying another firearm or learning an entirely different operating system.